Thank you very much. Welcome to the PRCA Public Sector Group. This is our first event for this year, and there'll be many more as the year goes by. And obviously the world has changed over the last few years, but we're hoping that we're starting to get back to some kind of normality. With me, I have an august panel, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves. Just in case you don't know who I am, my name is Marcus Chrysostimo. I'm chair of the PRCA Public Group. I'm a senior account director at Westco Communications, and I'm currently working as the head of communications at Havering Council. So I've got more than one hat on, as you can hear. What I'll do is I'll go around the panel. I'll kick off with my vice chair, Carrie Ann, and I'll work my way around. Carrie Ann.
Thanks, Marcus. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to have you all here. My name's Carrie Ann Wade. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Director of Communications at North East London NHS Foundation Trust, which is a community and mental health services trust. I'm vice chair of this group, hopefully supporting Marcus around some of the events that we put on. And I'm also founder of Cat's Pyjamas, which is my own company, which I use to follow my passion, which is to mentor and support communications professionals to grow and thrive in their careers.
Plenty going on. Lester.
Hi everyone, I'm Lester Posner and I'm head of communications for the Health and Safety Executive and also a member of the Government Communication Service. Thanks.
Thank you. Emmanuel.
Hi everyone, my name is Emmanuel. I'm the UK PR manager for Mercer. I'm also the vice chair of the Race and Ethnicity Equity Board, which is also part of the PRCA.
Thank you very much. Jack.
Hello everyone, my name's Jack Adlam and I'm the Regional Head of Communications for NHS England and NHS Improvement in the Midlands.
Great, thank you very much. And Shak.
Good afternoon everyone. Hello, my name is Shak and I'm the Strategic Communications and Stakeholder Engagement Lead for the Bradford District and Craven Health and Care Partnership.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining me on this panel. So this event, I suppose it's come from a couple places. One being looking at with what we've been through recently, and we all need to start thinking about the future. Are we fit for the future? And as part of that conversation, and I know it's a conversation many people have been having over time, is around diversity. So many of us are leaders here, and we have teams, and it's really interesting to hear people's views and feedback about is it a challenge, is it an issue for us, diversity in teams. And when I mean by diversity, I'm not just talking about race or obviously ethnicity. I'm talking about whether is disability, and there's lots of other issues that come with that as well. So what's really important for me as a leader of a team is making sure my team reflects the community in which we work. So I have I lead a council, local authority team, but it is a challenge. So I'm going to open up the conversation and kick off with Shak, thinking about our teams. Do you think it is really important that our teams do reflect the communities we work in?
Well, I can't answer that without saying yes. Absolutely. I think, there's lots of examples where, whether it's the public or commercial sector, where organisations have made simple faux pas. I mean, look, we all make mistakes in our working lives, but there's faux pas that can be avoided just by having a diverse and inclusive team and a network as well. So if it's not your team, then certainly having a network that can help you understand your blind spots, and then from there, how can you address those blind spots? So look, if you're looking at me, I've come from at least one protected characteristics, but I wouldn't say I'm an expert in my own community, and certainly not some of the other communities. So having that ability to call upon different people to market research ideas and do a bit of a sanity test on things is really important. So we talk about external market research, but having that team that is truly reflective of communities will develop better communications and more impactful communications.
Yeah, that's a really important point, isn't it? If you have a diverse team, hopefully you're going to get diverse ideas to help in our comms plans. Lester, I wonder if that's something you could talk about.
Yeah, no, I think it's a brilliant point that we're not going to get effective communications without really representative and diverse teams, and you can see that in a number of ways, both from what Shak mentioned around the insights to think about, how you might communicate, using the right language, looking out for your blind spots, but also I think it's in an ever increasingly complex world where communications professionals have to come together at a rapid pace. I think having that insight to hand to be able to move quickly across a team is incredibly important. I mean, one example, and just to sort of talk a little bit about my background as well, was when I was working on COVID communications. I come from a Jewish background, and just in terms of my own sort of example, that ability to have that insight to think about how we could connect with the more religious groups, for example, in Stamford Hill, and how to do that most effectively was incredibly important to building strong and effective relationships and hopefully getting across messages in difficult times. So that's just one example. Across the team on COVID, I think it was a diverse team, and that really, I think, helped a lot in thinking about what was the right tactics and strategies to use during a very challenging period. So yeah, absolutely agree with the importance that Shak mentioned there. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I know Hackney did a lot of work with the local Jewish community and spoke about it often. And in a similar way, being a Greek Cypriot of Orthodox faith, one interesting things that we saw in Havering is there's Eastern European population, and some of them are Orthodox. So and they did visit the Orthodox Church. So that was my contribution by saying I can have that conversation with the priest, who is a Greek priest, and in helping us reach that community. I know, Carrie-Anne, you did a lot of work also, didn't you, around reaching different communities, and I wondered if you found it useful having people from those communities helping you out in that communications side.
Yeah, I think in terms of those connections in the community, it's really important. So some of our outreach work around the COVID vaccination programme in some of our North East London boroughs was, specifically targeted around Polish communities and dispelling some of the myths that were circulating in some of those very local communities about why they might not want to have the vaccine. So being able to make those connections and actually have people who are part of those communities kind of supporting your communications and engagement work, I think is really important. I think when I reflect on my own team, though, I'm not convinced that currently my own team does reflect the communities that we serve, and I think I see some patterns in my own team that I see probably more widely reflected in the wider NHS as well, in terms of different roles and how different people from diverse backgrounds are maybe enabled to kind of go for maybe more senior roles, for example, within the wider NHS or within my own team. So for me, as you were all talking, there was something about as a leader who recruits into communications, do I do enough to understand my own bias, and do I have enough insight about how I as a leader might be thinking in terms of the way I recruit? So thinking about Shak's point around blind spots, I think that's really important as somebody who's recruiting into the profession, to kind of be really aware of, and making sure you've got a network of people where you can maybe kind of build some of your knowledge and understanding and really explore where some of your own bias might sit. So I think for me that's a really important part of trying to develop a team that reflects our local communities, just kind of being aware of that through kind of how you recruit into that team is an important part of that, I think.
Yeah, and I mean that segues quite nicely over to sort of the next question around recruiting. So I mean, do we think, I mean, I was looking at the PRCA research with regards to diversity in communication teams, and there's some interesting stats in there, which says that firstly, the industry is 91% white and 83% British. And although 64% of practitioners in the industry are women, 64% of senior roles such as board directors or partners are held by men. So, you know, it's a similar point there, isn't it? Around making sure that there is, you know, enough diversity at the top table. Jack, I wonder if that's something, you know, you've seen in the NHS, just talking about the NHS.
So absolutely, and I don't think those I think those stats would absolutely apply to the NHS. I'm very fortunate in the role that I work in, that I work with colleagues across a region, the Midlands region, and we can absolutely see that the recruitment, I think, is absolutely crucial. Now, picking up on Carrie's point, I think we absolutely have a duty as communications leaders, in no matter what sector we are, to do what we can to improve diversity in our teams, and we play an absolutely vital role in that. For me, there were three areas that I think, on my personal reflection, I've come to look at this particular journey. One is that we need a recognition of the importance of diverse teams, and we spoke about it at the beginning, and I think we all know the importance of diverse teams. To put it simply, diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams. It's quite, you know, it's quite simple like that. And as a leader of a team, I want my team to be the best performing team it can be. So that absolutely makes sense. We need the recognition. We then also need the commitment as leaders to do something about that. If we recognize the importance of it, if we recognize the challenge of it, we need the commitment to do something about it. And, you know, the panel clearly on this call recognize that, as I'm sure people do who are joining us today, as I do. The third bit, I think, is the challenging bit that we have as leaders, and that is the delivery point. We have a commitment, we recognize the importance of doing it, but I often think we fall down on the delivery bit. And again, I'm going to speak from experience here, that I, at times, see this particular challenge, it can be seen as too big. What on earth can I do? What can I do as Jack Adlam leading this team to really combat this major challenge? And actually, when I was doing some reading for this session, I actually saw a phrase that was, I think, from 2018 on the PRCA website, that said, long journeys are made up of many small steps. And I think that's the point, isn't it? I am never going to be able to solve, me or my team, the challenge that we face in creating diverse work teams. But what I can do is ensure that when I recruit to people in my team, I make it as inclusive as possible. That is what I can control. And one of the things that we're doing in the Midlands NHS team at the minute is looking at our recruitment practices from the very start, looking at the adverts that we put out, the job descriptions that we put out, right the way through the process to the interviews and the feedback that we offer to candidates, whether they be successful or not. And actually, when you talk to people, when you engage people, as I have been fortunate to do with my comms colleagues within the region, it's amazing the interventions, the small interventions that we can all make that are going to dramatically improve the way that we recruit. And I'll give you one example, which I think really, it sounds obvious when you say it, but it wasn't until somebody pointed out. A lot of our job descriptions, they are generic job descriptions, but a lot of our job descriptions talk about the need for a degree level qualification for, you know, to apply for a role. Actually, do we need a degree for all our roles? Do we need degrees for our candidates? I don't think we do. So even looking at the way that we describe things in job descriptions, even the way we describe things like salary bands, working arrangements, etc., where we advertise roles, you know, those are the interventions that we can make. And I think that has been a learning journey for me, that there are things that I can do that are going to make things better. It's never going to solve the entire challenge, but it's certainly going to make things better. So that's been my experience.
That's really, really interesting what you say there, Jack. And I absolutely agree with you. I don't think you do need a degree. And this is what, you know, we need people from different backgrounds with different experiences to help us in the work that we do. And I was talking about this about recruitment earlier on, weren't we? Emmanuel, going to come to you because I know there's been I know from experience, well, I don't, whether it's affected me or not, things like your name, for example, can sometimes affect, you know, when you're applying for a job. And I know that there, you know, you can do things like blind recruiting. I know I was talking about Taylor Bennett earlier on. I know Taylor Bennett have been doing a lot of work around this, haven't they? I wonder if Emmanuel, you can talk a bit about that.
Yeah, that's a really good point you've raised about the name, because I remember when I finished university, I was very conscious of my surname, very West African, and I remember kind of applying for jobs thinking, oh, I'm going into this industry where, you know, a lot of people don't really look like me, and no one that I was kind of seeing on time at the Craven Foundation. Well, when I was going into the agencies and in-house departments, I wasn't seeing any, you know, senior black men. And, you know, I've been in the industry for 10 years and I'm still not seeing enough senior black men. You know, I'm probably one of the most senior people, and I've been in the industry for 10 years now, and I wouldn't class myself as someone that is that senior. I'm still kind of rising in my career, but, you know, I was changing my name when I wanted to get into the industry because I was just really conscious that people wouldn't give me a chance. And it wasn't until I came in contact with the Taylor Bennett Foundation and I did the program and I got the experience that I was able to kind of get a foot in the door. But if we're talking about having diversity at all levels, I don't think that is something that we've cracked yet as an industry. It's definitely a work in progress. But I think things like, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement and, you know, issues around, you know, being an LGBT communications person, you know, all these issues that have kind of been there in the background have now been kind of pushed up to the top of the agenda, and now everyone's taking it seriously. So it seems like everyone's trying to do something about it. It's just the case, as Jack said, it's more around the kind of delivery and, you know, are people doing enough? You know, there's obviously some agencies out there that are doing an amazing job, you know, getting involved in lots of programs, you know, bringing on people like the Taylor Bennett Foundation and interns. But there's definitely, you know, room for improvement, and I feel like it has to start from the top because even when we look at the recruitment process, a lot of people are coming into the industry via people that they know. And if I had to come into the industry via someone I knew, I probably would not even be in this industry because I didn't even know what public relations was. When someone told me what PR was, I thought I was, you know, going to meet football players and be drinking champagne every weekend. I didn't know there was a whole kind of business aspect to it. You know, so it was a kind of baptism of fire for me when I came into communications, and I realized that there was this whole kind of corporate element where you have to kind of defend the company's reputation. And that was just based on me having that experience via the Taylor Bennett program. So I think it's really important for programs like the Taylor Bennett Foundation to be supported and to be given the kind of recognition that it deserves.
Yeah, that's a really good point you made there. I mean, I've done some lecturing at Christchurch University in Kent, and I've done graduates and MA, and I asked the question, and I had quite a mixed bag of people. I had people from lots of different backgrounds, which was great. I was really pleased that, you know, it was a PR marketing course, and I asked people what their plans were, what their aspirations were, and a majority of them didn't actually think about having a career in comms and PR. Many of them want to start their own business up, and in particular, I'd probably say half or maybe third of the group, 2/3 of the group were from some form of ethnic minority. Probably half of them were from a black background. None of them said, I want to go into a career in comms. I want to set my own business up, or I'm going to do something different. So it does make you wonder why you've chosen that as a degree, but then you start asking the question, well, why can't you see yourself in a job like comms? I wonder, Shak, if you had any thoughts about that. Well, why is it that people maybe from diverse backgrounds, or maybe who've got a disability or other, don't see themselves as having a career in comms? Are there barriers there that prevent that from happening?
It's interesting, isn't it? We're communications professionals, and the one thing we probably don't do really well is communicating our profession. And I think the point Carrie-Anne and other colleagues have made, from, you know, talking about the recruitment process through to do you need a degree, as Jack said, and all these things are really important, because I live in Leeds, but I work in Bradford, and Bradford is one of the youngest cities in Europe, and there's a a lot of untapped talent there. But to get those young people in, we have to get them at 16, or actually 14. This is a career choice and an opportunity for you. And then you can talk about some of the skills and some of the things we do as communicators now. Look, they've grown up around digital and social media. So they are probably more expert at engaging with our audiences than certainly I will be. I can't talk on behalf of the panel, but certainly more than I ever will be. I mean, I've just recently got a new phone and I've just worked out how to use it. So look, they've got that expertise that we're crying out for. What they need is the refining in terms of that office environment. So interesting conversation I had just today with a director of HR, and we were talking about apprentice programs and how he looked to engage. And this was not a comms apprenticeship, but apprenticeships in the broadest sense. And he was engaging with somebody from a socioeconomically deprived background, a white working class man, who said, I've never even been inside an office. I don't know what's in an office environment. It's these basic things that we have to get right. So I think there's something about recruitment as we move up the career ladder, but if we're not good enough to tell our own story as communications professionals, how can we, sell that as a career? And then secondly, for me, it's seeing people that look like us, that we can relate to in this industry, but not just in this industry, but excelling, because there's a lot of other influences at play for people, and if you can't see yourself being successful, so in effect you're going to start at a certain point in the career and you're not going to progress. That doesn't give me enough of a motivation to join the career. So for me, the key is promoting our career as a profession of choice, demonstrating that once you enter, you will be able to progress, and thirdly, you don't necessarily need that level of academic qualification that we put on pretty much all our job adverts. I'm pretty certain of it. And there's, as a bonus or fourth point, there are other routes in. So an apprenticeship in an associated field will give you some of those skills that actually are transferable to our profession.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, a couple of points there, but one, I mean, I got into comms by accident. I didn't have a degree. I got a job. I applied in the Standard for a job at the Northern Ireland office, and then got a next job in Downing Street, and I ended up in the press office, and that was my baptism into comms. I come from working class background, lived in a council house, didn't have anyone to tell me anything about careers or what I could do, and I found my way by accident into Downing Street working in comms. And and just thinking about cultural backgrounds, I was probably the first Greek Cypriot to do that job that I was aware of. Andrew Adonis was the first MP, I believe. But I do remember when the Greek or the Cypriot Prime Minister came to visit the Prime Minister, and they say, Marcus, come out and see us, because they knew I worked there. And for the community, it was a big thing for them. And I think it's quite interesting when you get that. But obviously the world has moved on massively in some cases, and I'm hoping that people are now hopefully getting careers in different industries not based on their names, or based on their experience, or thinking about what GCS do. I know GCS have done a lot of work around this, haven't they? And I was wondered, Lester, if you can tell us a bit about that.
Thanks, Marcus, and really interesting to hear everyone's experiences on the panel. So yeah, GCS you've been doing a lot of work over the last few years, and I think some of the areas colleagues on the call have talked about, but we've introduced things like an intern program over the summer, sort of a similar concept to what Emmanuel was saying around Taylor Bennett, which has been very successful. Similarly, apprenticeships, and what's been really good with the apprenticeships as well, which are focused on groups sort of from underrepresented backgrounds, has been the ability to see how we've been able to retain people who've come in on an apprenticeship and then been able to secure a permanent job. So that's been really promising. Some of the other areas we've been really working to develop. One has been reverse mentoring, which I know a lot of people do, which I think has been fantastic. And I think it comes to the point as well that when you have teams which, for whatever reason, are not as representative as you would like them to be, because it's a journey and I think we're all on it. I think being able to have that cultural understanding from different perspectives and learning from each other is incredibly important. It doesn't necessarily completely make up for the gap that you have from not having a fully representative team, but it does go some way. And my own experiences of that have been brilliant. I do some of that myself, and I've learned a huge amount, especially from younger people, as Shak was saying, some conversations around some of our digital skills as well. So that's been really, really good. But I would say, just to the point which was really made around progression, I do think it's a really, really big challenge. We talked about sort of pathways in and how to get people into the profession. I think the progression bit is really, really challenging, and I do think there is definitely some way to go, despite best efforts, and that's incredibly important in terms of getting a more representative and diverse leadership group within government communications as a whole. I think there's definitely a further journey to go on. One of the things that I think will really help, as well as sort of role modeling, the ability to see, as you said, someone like yourself in that position, I think it comes down to things like coaching for job applications as well. I've always found it sort of a simple thing in one way, but really effective. Some people might not necessarily feel like they would even want to ask for help in putting together an application for a more senior role, or might not have the networks that might give them that insight to do a really good application. So I think the ability to offer coaching and advice and to support people in that progression is again really important thing, and I think something we have to continue to really focus on to get that senior leadership even more representative. Thanks, Marcus.
So Lester, do you think we have a problem retaining people as well then, because they can't see themselves being at the top table?
I think that's right. And I was having a discussion with some colleagues today, just sort of thinking I was coming onto this panel, and there was something that really got to the nub of it, and I sort of felt, God, there's a lot more I need to do as a leader myself. And I said, so what do you feel sometimes are the real barriers to seeing yourself as a director of communications or progressing your career? And the person said to me, sometimes I just don't feel like I belong. And it's a really powerful insight, and it really sort of strikes struck me on a number of levels how much more we have to do, not just on the diversity side in terms of representation, but also on the inclusion side. Do people really feel they have a voice? Do they really feel that they can see themselves sitting at that top table? And there's really, really interested in other panelists' thoughts on that. How do we, if there's a sense of feeling like people don't belong in that top table, that's a serious issue for not just government communications, but to think about across the profession. Thanks.
Yeah, carry on. I'll bring you in here because I know you do a lot of mentoring and leadership training, don't you?
Yeah, oh gosh, everybody's I've got so many thoughts going around in my head. I'm going to try and be really concise and articulate them. But I guess from the point of view of the NHS, and I'll let my NHS colleagues shoot me down if they have a different view. I often look to GCS and think I'm so amazed at the structure that you put around the profession. And I think in the NHS, actually how we're, from all levels, how we're supporting people into communications as a profession, how we're developing them and supporting them to grow into leadership positions. I think we're left to our own devices a little bit to do that in our local areas. And I would really love to see the NHS nationally taking up a more proactive role in the way that GCS does around putting some structure around some of that. So if I think about my own development individually, I've had to go out and seek that, and I've been very proactive in doing that. And I've come from a very privileged position where I'm able and have been able to maybe afford to go on a course if my team's not been able to fund that for me throughout my career. But I just think, if I'm having to do that, and I come from space where I'm able to do that, that's not helpful for people who don't have that opportunity there. So I would really like to see some more structure around our profession within the NHS and how we develop communicators to be those communicators of the future. So I guess that was some of my initial thoughts without rambling on too much about it. But yeah, I just feel like there's more that we could do to help people access the development that they need. But I think your point, Lester, as well, is about reflecting on your own leadership. Like we have to want to develop people into those leadership positions. And, you know, my approach has always been, if I don't have the next role for somebody to be promoted into in my team, it's my duty to help them get that role somewhere else. And part of my role is to talk to my organisation about investing in comms as a profession, because I think sometimes the issue is, particularly in the NHS, you know, in some organisations, senior leadership roles are actually still at a manager level. Some are at a head level. Some organisations have a director of comms, but actually those directors of comms roles are probably not consistently there. So, you know, how do we work within the NHS and the wider public sector to kind of really get people to understand the benefit and the value of communications as a profession and invest in it? But then equally, how do we as leaders do that? And, you know, I have coached people through job applications within my own team. I know I'm going to lose a good person, but actually I can't hold them back because I don't have that opportunity in my team. You know, give people mock interviews, but you have to want to invest the time in doing that to support people's development. And, you know, I'm not sure maybe everyone has the capacity and the ability to be able to do that in the NHS when they might be a comms team of 3 rather than a comms team of 15. So I guess for me, there's something about consistency across the NHS in particular, which is where my experience is from.
Yeah, thanks, Clarion. Yeah, I mean, you made quite a lot of interesting points there. I was just thinking back to the point around, you know, seeing people like you in senior roles, and also people sometimes feeling like they're an imposter, you know, the imposter syndrome. You know, I'm sitting at the top table and everyone's a man, or I'm sitting at the top table and, you know, everyone is from one particular, you know, section of society, and it can be quite challenging trying to get people to think they could be around that table and not be an imposter. I mean, I don't know, Jack, if you've got any thoughts about, obviously in relation to what Carrie was saying about the NHS, but also about, you know, how can we get over this, you know, trying to get people to think they can be the right face in the right place as opposed to thinking they're not.
So a lot of you have made the points I was going to make, and the point about imposter syndrome, I think that goes beyond, I think, the work that goes beyond equality and diversity. I think we all in communications have that. I will gladly put my hands up and tell you that even now I have imposter syndrome. I sit in meetings with executive colleagues, director colleagues who really know their stuff. They've been in the NHS a long time. They're very wise. They're very knowledgeable, and I often think, what on earth am I doing in this room? How on earth have they let me in this room? And I'm sure all of us at all levels have exactly the same thing. One of the biggest things that I found in terms of helping overcome that is talking to my fellow comms colleagues, because the minute you realize that you're not alone in feeling that, the minute you realize that there are others who are feeling like that or have been through that, I think that can be a massive help to you. Just on the point we were talking about earlier about the barriers into the communications profession, I agree with Carrie-Anne. I'm amazed at the work that GCS do in terms of how open they are, and I think the NHS can learn an awful lot from them. But I think there is something that we as leaders should be doing, and that is talking about the importance and the value of the communications profession. You know, it amazes me how many people don't understand what it is that we do and don't understand the value that we offer. And it's probably not surprising when you look at the stereotypical spin doctors or people who are supposed to represent our profession, you know, whether you see them on telly, whether you see them in the media, etc. I don't think they're the kind of people who should represent our profession, if I'm perfectly honest.
I may have worked with a few of them in the past as well, Jack.
You may well have done. You may well. I remember. I'll give you my when I was studying public relations at Leeds University, Leeds University, my granddad said to me, "Oh, that's good. You want to be like that next Max Clifford, don't you?" Now, this was before his sexual shenanigans. But the point is, that's how people see the role that we do. Now, clearly, we know, having worked in this profession, that's nowhere near what we do. Our role, our contribution is far, far broader than that, and it's far broader than just media relations, for example. So I believe we as leaders absolutely have a role to play in showing people the work that we do. How do we get into schools and talk to people about comms being a viable career for people? How do we make sure that comms is represented at business events, not just comms events? Because we can all come to these events and we all talk to each other, and I 99% of the time we're all going to agree with each other, but we're not the ones who are the decision makers. And in the NHS, for example, we need to be talking to chief executives of organizations, for example. They're the ones who are going to decide whether they need to invest in directors of communications. They're the ones who we need to talk to and show them the intrinsic value that we bring as communicators. It's only by doing that we're going to create more opportunities for communications professionals to go into. So I'm very, I think that's a very, very important role that we have, about promoting the work that we do. And Shak's right, it's ironic in the profession that we're in that we're probably not as good as we should be.
Yeah, and I've always felt that, and there's always that conversation about, are we a profession, or and Shak, I just going to you. So what more can we do? What could we do? I mean, I know maybe talking to communities, I know schools or community groups that they put in the chat, but what else do you think we should be doing?
I think I actually don't want to repeat what colleagues have said, but carry on's point around the GCS framework and adapting and adopting that to make it fit for purpose for the NHS would be great if I'm looking at from a selfish NHS perspective. But if we're looking at a profession, I think there's almost feels like there's a communications campaign when the time's right to, in effect, do we link in with the colleges and the university sector to begin with? And then something to do with a career service and the apprenticeship service, all these big national bodies that are all about getting people into education and into employment. How do we link in with them and do that as almost like a campaign? I'm not necessarily volunteering, but at the same time, I would be interested, because I think that's the right route, because I definitely want to see representation. I want to see people who become leaders of tomorrow, who lead me, who come from the different communities. I want people who sound like me, because I don't speak the Queen's English. I've never attempted to, and it's important. But the other thing is, as communicators, we need to demonstrate what we bring for our communities. Why would you want to come to this profession? What can you contribute to your community and to your family? So in the public sector, we probably have an advantage in terms of that, the way we work and the value add we have to communities. But in the commercial world, I'm sure there's similar things, and coming out from a values-based proposition would help. I think also there's something about the reciprocal mentoring. There's something about learning from our communities, and I think there's something about avoiding tokenism as well. So I'll talk about recruitment, but I just wanted to move quickly into tokenism, slight digression, if that's okay, because the reason I say that is when we talk about blind spots, I loved what happened on International Women's Day, and the gender pay gap bot that said, great grand statements from these organizations, but actually look at their pay gap. And I think that people will see through that. So I just wanted to reflect on something, going back to the earlier discussion about diversity in the workforce, and those are the kind of things that would pick up. And then answering that question directly, I think there's a campaign in here as communicators that we can embark on, and there's something about those relationships with industry bodies. So what we can do at the macro level, that's down to us, but at a micro level, at a macro level, we need to think about the wider body, like DFE and all those other key partners as well.
Yeah. As someone who doesn't speak the Queen's English either, I was once told I spoke in estuary, and this is by someone who's from the northeast of England. So anyway, I'm not quite sure. It was a joke, but I mean, it is interesting, because you know, I think that's the point, isn't it? Is, you know, if we are talking to our communities and people, you know, people need to see people like them doing these kind of jobs. I wondered, Emmanuel, just thinking about, you know, backgrounds and where we're from, and you know, how do we do that? How do we get to it? Do you think that's an issue? Do you think we need to get to our communities and or do that grassroots kind of level recruitment, or, you know, doing our own PR? Because as you, I agree, Shak, the PR industry is crap at doing its own PR, because we spend most of our time managing someone else's PR or managing reputations, and we're not very good at doing our own one. But yeah, I mean, Emmanuel, I wondered if you had any views on that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think something that's worked for me, you know, I've always wanted to kind of give back to, you know, people like myself, and you know, I've always thought to myself, you know, what can I do? I can't get myself on TV because I'm representing my own organisation, but I can use my own social platforms and my own networks to kind of reach out and tell people what I'm doing. So that's something that I've done quite consistently over the last, you know, 2 years or so, and it's been amazing how many people have reached out to me just via LinkedIn, just to say, oh, hey, we saw you did this Q&A on PR. You know, can I have a 30-minute Zoom call with you? Can I have a coffee with you? You know, and it's just a case of giving time to you know, sometimes it can start off with one person, and then they will tell another person, and then just build up now. So I've mentored probably over 20 people since I started, you know, this kind of PR mentoring scheme. But it's not anything that I'm getting paid for. It's just something that I'm doing out of my own heart and wanting to give back. Because I feel like, you know, if I had someone like myself when I started, I'll probably be even further along than I am now. You know, I'm very proud of, you know, what I've achieved so far, but it's really, as I think somebody said earlier, it's quite daunting when you go into a kind of like a pitch room or, you know, a new business pitch, and you look around and there's no one that looks like you, and you're like, oh my God, if I speak, everyone here is going to look at me weird, or, you know, you just got this bit of fear behind your kind of ethnicity. That's something I had, but over time I've realized that everyone's seeing me as a normal person. They've just respected me for what I bring to the table, and a lot of the time, when you're from a kind of different background or different ethnicity, you overthink a lot when you're in the room with senior people. I don't know if Shak, if you experienced this, but I know when I started, I go into a room and I'm like, okay, I can't speak any colloquial English. I need to speak the Queen's English. I need to not speak too fast because I naturally speak fast. So I was actually pacing myself. I was breathing in my head and talking to myself, saying, okay, breathe, speak for 5 seconds, breathe. And it was just ridiculous things that I could do in my head. But over time, I've built confidence in who I am and who I am as an authentic person. And that's just given me the confidence to just be myself and just relax in certain situations. And I feel like that's actually helped me to come across as even more authentic and natural, you know, when I'm speaking to people. And that can really help, you know, for people who are trying to get into the industry. And there's also another point I wanted to touch upon. When we talk about doing our own PR, there's some issues that I think we still need to address. So when we talk about the kind of gender pay gap in the communications industry, you know, there's a lot of senior women doing roles the same as men, and they're getting paid a lot less. And it's just something that I feel like over time, it's just gotten bigger and bigger. So, you know, you can compare women at the director level and men at the director level, and you can see that the pay gap is just huge. And then when you kind of take it a notch down into ethnicity, it's bad as well. So it's these certain issues that I think we need to really just keep, as I'm going to say, we need to just keep banging on about them, because until people, you know, get their finger out and start making some changes, these gaps are just going to continue to grow. So I think we as an industry need to really just, you know, try to close the gap regarding pay as well, because, you know, if we're talking about the public sector as well, you know, a lot of people do not want to work in the public sector because they're like, oh, I'm not going to get paid as much. But why is that the case? You know, what's the difference? We're all doing good work. We're all doing valuable work. You know, a lot of you are working for the NHS. When we were going through COVID, we were looking to people like the NHS to help us. You know, so these people are the people that should be remunerated at the right level and should be paid accordingly for the kind of impact that they have on society. And I just feel like right now, you know, if you compare like the more commercial side of communications, people are paid ridiculous amounts of money. And a lot of the time, when you look down into what's actually being done on a day-to-day level, some people at the top are not really doing much. So it needs to kind of balance out. So I think that's where we need to really just kind of start making some changes.
Yeah, I mean, it's so. I mean, I was thinking about what is comms. I mean, if someone asked me what I did for my job, I'll give them a long list of different things, and none of it will probably be what they expect. You know, I mean, I was looking at the chat earlier on, and you know, what people thought comms was when I was trying to explain what my job was to my family. In the end, I said I'm one of the men who gets stories into local newspapers. You know, now, oh yeah, I get that, but it's not just that. You know, we do so much. You know, we manage and protect reputation. You know, we run behavioural change campaigns. You know, we can change people's lives. You know, the work that we all did during COVID. You know, making sure people got the care they needed, making sure we knew where to get the jab. You know, that's some big stuff there. But also, you know, going back to reputation, I mean, I'll go to you, Lester, because the health and safety executive's got an interesting reputation. And as in my early working days, you know, the media used to hit the HSE quite a lot, didn't it? Because he was always coming out with rules that the Daily Mail never liked. So, you know, when you get that kind of reputation, you know, number one, people might think, why would I want to go and work for you? So how do we get over that? The public sector is a great place. You get a great pension, hopefully you get a great career, or am I just making it up? I don't know. What's your view?
Yeah, no, it's interesting what you say about HSE. Just thinking about how things have changed now and the importance of you know, proper regulation post some of the terrible tragedies we've seen, like Grenfell Towers. Yeah, no, look, I go to work every day, and I generally wake up feeling really positive about what I do as a career. You know, as you said, Marcus, you sort of think about what am I here to do, and I feel like in my role, and I am definitely privileged in the role that I do, as you know, leading a communications team with a really important mission to protect people and places that I can influence for public good. You know, and I can see the results of the work I do, the outcomes, you know, in helping to affect people's lives for the better. So I do think there's something in that space around how we tell our story better and how we link it to the outcomes of what we achieve. All of us in our roles are doing incredibly important things across so many different sectors. And I think if we could tell that story a little bit better, and then picking up on the points around how we show the diversity of people working in the profession to deliver these, you know, these really important outcomes to society, I think that's an important way into attracting people into the profession and you know, building the reputation up of the public sector, which I know sometimes comes in for a hit unfairly. You know, again, thinking of the remarkable work that, you know, people across this panel were doing on COVID and various other big issues. The other thing that really sort of struck me listening to what people said today, I was just really reflecting on sort of GCS and what you've been saying around the structures and the networks and what we're doing. And in some ways, I've probably been taking it for granted a little bit around having that sort of structure, you know, including things like sort of accelerated development schemes for underrepresented groups, where we can bring, you know, sort of a various package of things, whether it's coaching or mentoring, bring that together for individuals. And I think we definitely should give some more thought to how we can share that knowledge and what's working and that structure a little bit more across the communications profession. So it's definitely something that I'll bring back with to the table, having listened to contributions today. Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks. Karen, what do you think? Is there something more you think should be done or should be doing to try and make sure we are recruiting people from, you know, different backgrounds into our teams?
I think Jack's made some really good points actually in the chat about, do we understand why people don't find this an attractive profession, why people not choosing to join public sector communication. So I felt like I agreed with Shak. There's a campaign coming on here somewhere, I think, to try and do that. And we all have roles, don't we? I reflected on what Emmanuel was talking about around, you know, using his platform and his opportunities to share his experience and what he's doing and to be authentic as a leader. And I think that's something that you know, we all need to hold on to. And I feel myself very privileged, as Lester said, to be in a position where, you know, I do lead a communications team in a brilliant organisation, but I can still see there is always more to be done. I think probably there's something about how do we come together and have a stronger voice. I think, you know, we're always going to be stronger together. So what is it we can do as a collective? But absolutely agree with Jack's points that he made very early on about it's sometimes easy to feel overwhelmed and think there's nothing that I personally can do. But I think we could all go away from tonight's session and reflect on, you know, is there one small step that each of us could take to try to encourage more diversity within our own teams and with our professions. And I've been really humbled to hear people's experiences on the panel this evening, and it's given me lots of food for thought, I think, about, you know, where I might need to go next, both in my own leadership approach, but also with my own team and more broadly across the NHS to kind of support this really important conversation to be more than a conversation, to actually have some impact.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting when you I mean, being able to self-reflect is a really powerful tool, isn't it? And you know, none of us are perfect, and we all, you know, we strive. Well, hopefully we strive to do the best, but we still make mistakes. And but the other bit is, someone made the point later on, it's really good to talk to other people, you know, who work, you know, have similar experiences, or, you know, that's why the good old-fashioned conference and networking was always good, wasn't it? So you could have those conversations with people who, you know, experiencing the same things as you, talk about those problems. And I don't know about you, Jack, but I do feel that, I think it was mentioned earlier on, people are talking about these issues more now. I think years ago there may have been a fear of having these kind of conversations. Maybe we have turned a bit of a corner and it is higher up on the agenda. But once again, it's not perfect, is it? You know, we're still not seeing as much diversity at the top table, for example, as we'd like to see. And there are lots of reasons for that, I'm sure. Jack, what's your view?
So I think you're absolutely right. This even in my time in the communications profession, just about 12 years now, we've come on an awful long way. But the proof will be in the pudding, as they say. The proof will be how many of those senior roles are being filled by people who, quite frankly, don't look like me or have the same experience and background as me. That is how we're going to be measured. And what we've spoken about today is, quite rightly, our commitment and the inputs that we can all do. And I have no doubt that there will be many people who can talk about the inputs, the actions that they are taking, but we are going to be measured on the outcomes. That's what we're going to be measured on. And unless we can see more diverse teams, more diversity at that senior level, unless we can see the real, meaningful, lasting change that we all want to see, then quite frankly, we have failed. We have not done what we need to do. And the my regional HR people director, he talks about this very often. It's very commendable talking about the work that we're doing, but unless we can get it actually in the outcomes, we're not going to have achieved what we can do. And look, I do genuinely believe this is come an awful long way, and the fact that we're having these conversations today is absolutely commendable. But we do, and we shouldn't hide our light under a bushel. There's been some fantastic work, and the stuff that Lester said about what the GCS are doing is fantastic, but we should also recognise we've got a long way to go. But the commitment, as I mentioned earlier, the commitment is clearly there. We now need to take the action to deliver it.
Now, almost come to an end, but Shak, quick question to you. Do you think, I'm thinking of the word social value. Is there more we should be doing, going into our communities, you know, engaging with them more to encourage them to think about, you know, PR in the public sector, or PR per se as a career?
Thanks, Marcus. So without wanting to sound like I'm preachy about this, I think, yes, we can do more, but we have to accept we've all got limitations in terms of our work-life balance and things outside work. So there's lots of different ways that we could potentially contribute. So one of the challenges potentially we're going to set for our health and care partnership and comms colleagues working in our system is, could we potentially mentor a student at the local, I'm saying the university, I know we've spoken about schools and colleges, but we've got an issue with our local university that it attracts people from the local community in Bradford, and 90% of graduates in certain postcodes go on to find no job at all, or a job not related to the degree they've done. So I think there's a challenge for us to mentor, and I think Emmanuel and what he described earlier is a great example and an inspiration for all of us. How can we at least support one person into the world of work, even if we don't get them into the world of communications, but almost by stealth, you'd hope that by mentoring someone into that world of work and how that working environment operates, we can also engage enough with them to get them into communication as a profession.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we haven't spoken about is the terrible statistic about people with disability as well not having careers, and we haven't. I mean, it just shows you it's such a big subject, isn't it? That probably an hour doesn't give us enough time. So we didn't get around to talk about that, but so I think we've all agreed that there is more that can be done. I think we've all agreed that we have moved forward and things are hopefully going in the right direction, but there's an awful lot more that needs to be done. And how valuable it is to make sure we've got diversity, whatever that means, in your teams, because it does make makes what we do better, and actually will give us additional insight that we might not necessarily have had before, talking about people from different communities as well as different ethnicities. So I won't nick the future is bright, because I don't think it ain't quite there yet, but I think the ringing endorsement for the GCS, they probably win the prize tonight, Leicester, so you can take that back to your GCS colleagues to say, basically we just need to copy what they do. And I think I'll just very briefly say, with regards to local authorities, they've all got their own individual HR teams that do their own HR. So having that kind of group mentality, group hive mind of recruitment, or how you do things in the GCS is probably a great way forward. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We've run out of time really quickly there. So it's been really, really interesting. Thank you so much for your contributions. I hope everyone watching gained some valuable insight. As I say, I wasn't able to cover every subject, so there might be another conversation in future. But thank you very much. Have a great evening, and good night.